message, and if you have your bulletin, you see we put my message title and my outline, and you sort of fill in. We don't give them all, so you can sort of listen and fill it in as we go. But the title of the message today is Answering the Call. Our key verse, and we'll have many more verses, so if you have your Bible, you take it and look, and if we always try to put the scripture on the screen too that might help, but it never replaces the Bible, so I encourage you to don't read your Bible home, read your Bible. But our key text today is 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10. And once you find that, if you will, in reference to reading God's holy word, we believe in doing like they did in the Old Testament. When they read the Bible in the Old Testament, everybody stood. So if you would, once you find 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 10, please stand. And the Lord came and stood and called as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant, period. My Father which art in heaven, so many times, Father, I think you call our name. We don't hear. Father, today you've put upon my heart to preach a message about that, about answering the call. So many times, Father, we like to just come and be what I call this be. Don't bother me. I just want to come sit here. I want to just come listen, and when I'm through, I want to go home. And maybe I'll see you again Wednesday night or Sunday night. But for me, Father, it would be just I'll see you next Sunday morning. So, Father, we need to answer that call. As you've called each of us into service, Father, we need to be faithful and obedient. We can use Samuel as an example today as we study. So be with me, Father. Decrease me now, increase through me. Use me for the glory of your kingdom. I love you today, Father, in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. As we speak about answering the call, I brought my cell phone. I imagine if you're old enough in here, everybody has a cell phone. Am I correct? Just about everybody has a cell phone. I was sort of late in getting one. I got my whole family one, and I sort of put it off because I didn't want it. But as I become a preacher, I felt the need because you need to be accessible. And accessible now is the key thing. As you want people to be accessible to you, God wants you to be accessible to Him. Now, I think many of you, as I begin today, many of you can know what I'm talking about when we say answer the call. Have you ever been trying to get up with somebody and you really needed to talk with them and they don't answer? You ever look, why don't they just answer? I've been trying to call them all day. Nothing make my wife's not here, so I can talk about my wife today. Y'all don't tell her. She made me wear this woman tie. So I'm going to talk about it. What is this stuff that these women, what is that? You women know what that is. Lily, they don't make that for men, do they? I'll be to cut that off of somebody's dress. But she thought it would look good. And y'all know what I've learned, men? A happy wife is a happy life. And so I wear it there and stuff. But my wife is bad. She works and she cuts that phone down on silent. And I need to call her and I need to talk to her. And I just can't get up with her. And that aggravates me that she won't answer the call. Now, has anybody in here ever tried to call somebody and had the same problem? Raise your hand. I want to see. Just about all of y'all. So y'all know what I'm talking about now. How frustrating it is when somebody doesn't answer the call. So now you're going to get my message? God might be calling you. How does God feel when you don't answer that call? Now, last week, just to catch you up to par, we talked about Hannah. Hannah was married to Elkanah, and Elkanah, they didn't have any children. He married Hannah first. Hannah was his love of his life, and he married her, and they were married for 10 years and had no children. Back in that day, in the Old Testament, it was very important to have children. So since they didn't have any children, she says, well, why don't you take another wife? It wasn't God's plan to have more than one wife, but he wanted her to have she wanted him to have children, so he married Peninnah. And Peninnah right away began having children. And poor old Hannah couldn't. And Peninnah began making fun and bullying Hannah and said, well, I've just washed my kids. What about you, Hannah? And just doing all kinds of things. Finally, after 19 years of marriage, they'd been married 19 years, no children, Hannah had all that she could handle. You ever been there at that place? Lord, I've took it just as long as I can go now, Lord. I've tried to handle it. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to wait. I've tried to be understanding. But God, I just can't be that way anymore. This is where Hannah was at. She was to the point in her life, God has got to happen today. I can't take it any longer. So she went to the temple and she prayed a prayer, a simple prayer. God, I want you to give me a man child. And God, if you'll give me a man child, I'll give him back to you. Lacey, you're getting ready to have a child, right? That'd be a tough vow, wouldn't it? Because you love, y'all looking forward to that child. And you know at the time when that child's born, you're not looking forward to having to give it back to the Lord, but we should. They're gifts from God. But she means literally. Some of us say we'll give them back. We come and have a baby dedication, and we present that baby back to the Lord and understand. But she really was going to give them back. See, Eli was at the temple. Back at the time, they had the Ark of God, the Ark of the Covenant. It was there at the temple, and Eli was a priest. So what she was going to do was bring Samuel back and give him to Eli and let Eli raise him up at the temple, close to God. And when it come time that she was able to wean the child, she gave Samuel back. She brought him back to Eli. She gave him to Eli. And every year when her family, her and Elkanah came, every year she would come to see her son once a year, and she'd make Samuel a special little coat and bring to Samuel. So Samuel, Mama's brought you a coat. Samuel knew that was his mother, but she'd made a vow and she kept. And because she kept her vow, God blessed her with 5 more kids. God opened that womb, and she had more children. So now we're to the point you understand about Samuel. We'll pick up here that Samuel has grown, and he's in the house, and we see that Samuel now, it's estimated, the Bible doesn't tell us, but if you study out, in chapter 3, if you're looking for Samuel, chapter 3, Samuel's about 12 years old. And it's time for all of them to go to sleep. Now you follow along as we read the first 9 verses of 1 Samuel chapter 3. And it says, and the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli. Now he's a young boy, but he's learning about the ministry from that. And the word of the Lord was precious in those days. There was no open vision. Now let's hold on. Because if we look, and we read from the King James Bible here, so if you look at that word precious, we look at precious as, boy, that's good. But that's not what that word means in that verse. Precious in that verse means rare. The people were falling away from God. They weren't coming to worship like they were. And there was no open vision. People were not. They even said, look, turn on over to Judges 21:25, Sydney. Look what they said that was happening in those days. In those days, there was no king. Can you flip it back? When you have technology, sometimes Satan tries to get in, but he's not going. I'll just read it to you. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and every man did that was right in his own eyes. They had no leadership. Now, if you think about that, and I just want to make this reference, think about how Israel was there. America's the same way today. The leadership's been so bad, and where people's going there and stuff, people are doing what they want to do. Exactly what they want to do. And that's what they did then. They had no leadership. And Eli and them and the priesthood and stuff weren't doing a very good job also, and I'll show you why. And it came to pass at that time in verse 2, when Eli was laid down in his place, and his eyes began to wax dim, that he could not see. And ere the lamp of God went out of the temple of the Lord where the ark was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep, that the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, Here am I. And he ran unto Eli, because he thought it was Eli that was calling him, and said, Here am I, for thou callest me. And Eli said to him, I call not, lie down again. And it says he went and lay down. And the Lord called yet again, Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And he answered, I call not, my son. Lie down again. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. He hadn't had that experience of knowing the Lord, of salvation. Neither was the word of the Lord yet revealed unto him. He was just working, learning the customs of the temple. But the Lord called Samuel again a third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, Go lie down. And it shall be, if he shall call again, that thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And our first verse we read, And the Lord came and stood as at other times. Samuel called as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. I want to take a moment before I go any farther talking about the call of God. I'd always heard preachers talk about how God had talked to them. And I didn't understand. I said, do you hear a voice? How do you know he's talking to you? What kind of message do you hear? But then I had the experience of having it happen to me. I was active in church. I was a deacon in church, doing everything that I was supposed to do. And my church knows this, but at 46 years of age, I got thyroid cancer. And that thyroid cancer, not knowing I had thyroid cancer, had a goiter in my throat, had to go have the goiter removed, and from all of that, the word come back that it was cancer. I remember that night so well when the doctor come in and told me about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, Dale, you've got cancer. Well, see, when you hear cancer, we automatically think of death. I had a son that was in med school. I had a daughter who was just starting college. I said, Lord, really? And I was having that tough time. I stayed out of church for a while. I just got back in church. I thought I was doing everything right, trying to be faithful. I said, God, I'm back this time. I won't go anywhere else. And it's at those times that we think we're on our very best behavior, doing our very best, that God sometimes allows these things to happen. Is it a test of faith? What causes it? We don't know. But anyway, it gets our attention. At 3 o'clock in the morning, after I'd come home from the hospital that night, I told the doctor, I just want to go home. Let me go home. I was sitting there in my house, in my living room at 3 o'clock in the morning. My cousin had brought me some tapes. Back at that time, we still had the VHS. DVD hadn't come out yet. He said, some Christian music I thought you might enjoy. So at 3 o'clock, I said, well, I'll put one in and listen. And I did not plan this. I don't know how it happened, but it added to my experience. When I put in that first song, it was on Amazing Grace. That was my grandma, who I was raised with. My grandma helped raise me. That Amazing Grace, that was a song that she always sang. And as that song began to sing, I just began to cry. And I didn't know why I was crying, but I couldn't stop crying. I just cried and cried and cried. And then while I was crying all by myself in my living room at 3 o'clock in the morning, a call came in from God. I never forgot it. I never experienced anything like that. But God spoke to me. I didn't hear a voice, but I knew it just as well. It says, God, he says, Dale, I'm going to take care of your cancer. You're not going to die. I'm going to take care of it and get rid of it, but I want you to do something for me after I heal you. And it was just as plain as day. It said, I want you to go preach my word. I had never thought about preaching. I've been a school teacher, taught Sunday school. I enjoyed that. Preacher, God knows. But see here, I had cancer. I was like Hannah. I was ready to vow anything. I said, all right, God, you take care of this cancer, and I'll preach. And I did like everybody else, and I shared that Wednesday night. I waited for about a year after I was through with cancer. I guess I was waiting to make sure it didn't come back, but it didn't. And I walked the aisle at Cedar Creek Baptist Church and professed that God had called me to preach, and I'm here. If I hadn't answered the call, all the things that God's allowed to happen through my life, not that I did, but all the things that he allowed to happen through my life, salvations, prayers that I've been able to pray with people, just being able to help people from what I've experienced, none of that would have ever happened. I would have still been sitting where you at, right on that pew, listening to a preacher. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want you to see today that God might be called you to do a little bit more. As we look back now and we see the call, the Lord called Samuel. Let's look at our second point, what the Lord told Samuel. After he did that, he had Samuel's attention in verses 11 through 18 in chapter 3. We see the Lord said to Samuel, behold, I will do a thing in Israel. Because why was he upset with Israel? He was upset with Israel because they had turned from him. It said that it was precious, rare for the worship at that time, at which both the ears of everyone that heareth it shall tingle. God says, I will cause something to happen in Israel, told Samuel, that's going to cause people's ears to tingle. Now I'm telling you, it's coming. He's going to do the same thing in America. He's going to do something that we're going to just can't believe it's going to happen. It's coming because the Bible says it's going to happen. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime or your lifetime, but I promise you it will happen. Because God's word's not inerrant. And if God said it's going to happen, and he does say it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Now he's telling Samuel here that this is going to happen. It says in verse 12, in that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. And Samuel lay until the morning and opened the doors of the house of the Lord, and Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. Because he hated to tell Eli what God was going to do. He's going to destroy your family, Eli. Then Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son? And he answered and said, Here am I. And he said, What is this thing that the Lord hath said unto thee? I pray thee, don't hide it from me. God do so to thee, and more also, if thou hide anything from me, and all the things that he said unto thee. And Samuel told him every whit, and hid nothing from him. And this is what Eli said, It is the Lord, let him do what seemeth good. So what did the Lord tell Samuel? He gave him a vision. He told him, says, I'm going to destroy Eli's house. I want you to think back now real quickly about Samuel's birth. God's got a plan all along. And Samuel was important to fulfill God's plan. That child needed to be born to fulfill what God knew was going to take place and knew what was going to happen. Now, we might not have the magnitude of Samuel, but I believe, with no doubt, that each and every one of you that's born in here today, God had a plan when you were born for you to fulfill while you were here on earth. Now, whether you do it or not, it's really up to you. But God had a plan for it. Now, Eli was good. He was a good priest. But why did the Lord tell Samuel these things? Well, it's because of his kids. He had 2 kids. And we find in 1 Samuel chapter 2, we find that the 2 kids that he had were very evil. Now the sons of Eli were the sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord, but yet they were the priest's son. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant came, and while the flesh was in seething with a flesh hook of the teeth in his hand. To paraphrase and to save a little time, the 2 sons he had was Hophni and Phinehas. These 2 boys were working in the temple with their dad. And when the people brought their sacrifice that they were going to sacrifice to God, they were taken to sacrifice to cook for their own self. Now it was custom that the priests were supposed to get some of the meat to have so they could eat, because of the Levite tribe, the priests were the godly tribe, and they didn't have a portion like everybody else. But for them to do what they were doing was not right. But the worst thing that they were doing is found in chapter 2, verses 22 through 24. Now Eli was very old and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. That's found in chapter 2, verse 22. Think about that. His 2 sons not only were stealing meat from the people who were coming into the temple, but the women that were coming there too, they were laying them, and I won't say any more, you know what I'm talking about, with children present. but they were laying with the women that was outside of the gate at the tabernacle. And these were supposed to be men of God. People, there's no difference today in what's happening in America with pastors that you hear about, Catholic priests that you hear about, abusing small little boys and doing all kinds of ungodly things. The same things happening in America that was happening back at that time. And if God took care of it then, what makes you think God's not going to take care of it sometime in America? Now, one thing I told the people when I came, I might not be the greatest pastor, and I know I'm not the greatest preacher, but I promise you one thing, I will never live my life in a way that will ever embarrass you as your pastor at Iron Hill Baptist Church. Whatever you see, whatever you hear me talk about, whatever I'm doing, you can bank that I'm living that type life. I'm not going to be up here preaching something and living a different life. That's not me. I cannot stand before God and even do that. Eli, what he was being held accountable for, because he did not take care of his family. Now, I got 2 grown kids. I got a boy who's 6'4 and a half, and he's 39 years old. But I can tell you one thing, if I see he's not doing something right, this old dad, he's going to him, he's going to stand right in front of him, and I'm going to tell him. I don't care if he is 39 years old. That's my child, and I feel responsible. Same way with my daughter who couldn't be here today. Parents, you have the same responsibility. So many times parents think, well, I've raised him. I've done all I can. No, you haven't done all you can. That's your child till the day they die, till the day you die. You're responsible for their actions. Eli was responsible. He was not going to go to hell because of their actions, but as a priest in the house doing the priestly service, he was responsible. That was a direct reflection upon him and his family. It's like I tell them as you become members of Iron Hill Baptist Church. You represent the church when you're outside of the church. If you were a teacher in this church, if you were a deacon within this church, and you're going out partying on Saturday night, drinking it up, and then coming back and trying to do your duties at the church, that's a reflection on the church, and God's not going to stand for it. And if I find out about it, I'm not going to stand for it. Amen. That's the way God is. Now, you can hide it from me. See here, Eli, he didn't know what his sons were doing. The Bible said that he heard about what his sons were doing. Let's see what Eli told them. If we look back at verse 23, he said unto them, why do ye such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. So they kept it from Dad. They didn't let Dad know that all this was going to happen. They were doing it behind Dad's back, but finally it come to light. And he said in verse 24, nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear, and you make the Lord's people to transgress. You see, you'll respect me as your pastor. And anything I tell you, you're sort of going to believe, well, he's the pastor, he should know. So I can lead you down the wrong path very easily. That's the reason you need to study your Bible. You need to know what your Bible says, and you need to hold me accountable. Now, I promise you, I would never intentionally ever lead wrong, or I would never make this Bible inerrant in any way in the interpretation. And I tell people, I'm always open to come for a discussion if you've got a question about something I preach. You show me I'm wrong, I could be wrong, I'm a man. But I try to preach it the way God gives it to me. And Eli, it was hid from him. And God wasn't going to put up for it. But he needed a plan. He needed somebody to take over after Eli was out of the way. So finally we see the Lord's words are fulfilled. God tried to give Eli an opportunity to change things. If you're here today and you don't have things right with God, I truly believe this is the part that I'm trying to tell you. God's going to present you an opportunity to get things right. God sent, it says in verse 27 in 2 Samuel, and there came unto Eli a man of God. He was another prophet. And in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 31, it says, behold, the days come. This is what the priest told Eli. He said, behold, the days will come that I will cut off thine arm and the arm of thy father's house, that there shall not be an old man in thine house. And thou shalt see an enemy in my habitation. And all the wealth which God shall give Israel, and there shall not be an old man in thine house forever. God's talking about killing them people. If you don't have an old man in your house, that means death came about. And the old man of thine, whom I shall not cut off from mine altar, shall be to consume thine eyes, and to grieve thine heart, and all the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age. And this shall be a sign unto thee, that thou shalt come upon thy two sons, on Hophni and Phinehas, and one day they shall die, both of them. He's telling them, your two sons, because they're evil, they're going to die. And I will raise me up a faithful priest, that shall do according to that which is mine heart and in my mind. Who do you think he's raising up? He's raising up Samuel. And I will build him a sure house. He shall walk before mine anointed forever. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left in thine house shall come and crouch to him for a piece of silver and a morsel of bread, and shall say, put me, I pray thee, into one of the priest's office, that I may eat a piece of bread. Eli was told. Now, if I told you today that if you don't accept Jesus Christ, you're going to burn in hell the rest of your life, you've been told. I can't do anymore. The left is up to you to change. I can only tell you the consequences. God sent a man of God to Eli to tell him the consequences of your family, Eli. You got to get a grip on it. You got to change. But Eli didn't hearken. The Lord's words are fulfilled in 1 Samuel chapter 4. You remember I told you he said he's going to do something that will cause the ears to tingle? Well, the death of the sons didn't do it. You know, he said he was going to send somebody. Going to send somebody to defeat you. 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 10. He sent the Philistines. And the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten. And they fled every man into his tent, and there was a very great slaughter. And there fell of Israel that day 30,000 footmen, because of the sin of two boys that was the priest's son. If one of them 30,000 was your son, would you be upset? I would. And the ark of God, this is what's more than anything else, and the ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, what did the man of God tell them? Your two sons are going to die. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. God wiped them out. Exactly what God said he was going to do. Now, Eli handled pretty good about his sons being slain. He handled pretty good about the 30,000 men being slain. But when he heard they took God, that God is what they say about Elvis. Elvis has left the building. God had left the building. Look what happened to Eli when he was told the news. Verses 16 through 18. One of the soldiers came and ran away. It said in verse 15, now Eli was 98 years old. His eyes was dim that he could not see. In verse 16, and the man said unto Eli, I am he that came out of the army, and I fled today out of the army. And he said, what is there done, my son? And the messenger answered and said, Israel has fled before the Philistines. Never before this ever happened, because God was always with them. And there hath also been a great slaughter among the people, and their two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead. And the ark of the God is taken. And it says in verse 18, it came to pass, when he made mention of the ark of God, that Eli fell from the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck brake, and he died. For he was an old man and heavy, but he had judged Israel for 40 years. So now we're left with Samuel. Samuel answered the call. Eli didn't answer the call. God gave him every opportunity and he judged for 40 years, but Eli didn't take care of everything he should take care of. I want to ask you today, have you answered the call that God's called upon your life? Dwight Moody had a Sunday school teacher who reached out to him. I can't remember his name right now, but reached out to him and presented the gospel to Dwight Moody. It is said that that's the only person he ever presented the gospel to. That's the only person he ever saved or presented the gospel to that God saved in his life. But Dwight Moody was a man that saved tens of thousands of people. If that Sunday school teacher had not been faithful in doing what he was supposed to do, Dwight Moody could have never have done what he was supposed to do. God might have put you here on earth to go talk to one person. It could be a person suffering with cancer that just needs you to hear your story. It could be that drug addict that's hooked on drugs that you need to go talk to and say, look, it's time to stop this. It can be that alcoholic who's taking those drinks and destroying that family. God might have raised you up because he wanted to send you there one day. I'm telling you how this works. You say, answer the call. I ain't heard God calling me. You ever been riding down the road and somebody was on your mind? Why do you think that person's on your mind? You didn't do that. God put that person on your mind. And God expects you to answer that call and do what it's supposed to. We're going to have a time of invitation today. Our altar is going to be open. I'm going to be here if I can pray with you. Maybe you just want to come talk to God. Maybe he's been telling you something. Maybe you want to say, God, today I got it. Maybe you want to say like Samuel, say, God, here am I. We got a song that Brother Wilbert, he picks out some fine songs sometimes and we play them on a thing. Alan Jackson sings How Great Thou Art. Won't you please stand as we play that song for you and you obey what God tells you to do today.